If you're traveling to Albania this summer or you're dreaming of a trip to Albania, then this video is for you and you have to check this video out until the end because I will share my best travel tips to Albania. So in March of this year, I spent 2 weeks in Albania, in this beautiful, beautiful country. And in this video, I want to share some of my best travel tips to Albania and also some things that I wish I knew sooner before traveling to this country. So let's get into the video. And by the way, my name is Mila and I make travel content like this every week. So if you would like to see more travel videos, then make sure to subscribe to my channel. So let's start off with talking a bit about public transportation and buses in Albania, to be more clear. Because chances are, if you're not renting a car in Albania and you're planning on visiting multiple places across Albania, then you're probably gonna use the bus. And the buses in Albania are convenient to use and also very affordable, so they're a great way to get around in Albania, especially if you do as I recommend you to do, to visit a few different places while you're there. So first of all, some information about the buses. So in Albania, you don't need to book any buses in advance and you always have to pay the tickets in cash to the driver or a person who collects the money in the bus. So you do that during the journey and you have to pay in cash. So always make sure to carry around enough cash in Albania when you're taking the bus, and also just in general because everything is paid by cash. And as I said, you don't need to book anything in advance. You just walk up to the bus station or bus terminal or bus stop and check which bus is going to the location or destination that you want to go to, and then just go on that bus and then pay whenever they ask you for money. They usually have, like in the buses, they have signs which says which city the buses are going to, so just follow those signs and ask for help if needed. The Albanian people are super helpful and always ready to help, so if you're looking for a specific bus and you maybe can't find it, then just ask for help and I'm sure you're gonna get some help from the Albanian people. And as I mentioned, bus prices are very affordable. I'm just gonna check some examples here because I have a few. So Gjirokaster to Saranda is 400 lek, Saranda to Ksamil is 150 lek, and yeah, you just pay the bus driver or the person collecting the money in the bus with cash. And there might be some exceptions, like if you're traveling by bus from Saranda to Tirana, then there is the ticket office right next to the bus stop or bus station in Saranda, where you have to get your ticket before entering the bus to Tirana. And this is something that the driver will also mention usually, at least that's what they did for me. But again, you can just buy the ticket right before taking the bus to Tirana. But this is just something to keep in mind while you're traveling in Albania. Things don't usually just work like one way. There's like different ways of working and the buses are not as organized as in Western countries, but I guess they're organized in their own way. They have their own way of working with these buses and bus stops. So yeah, during my travels in Albania, I checked a lot of bus timetables on Albania Tour Guide. Yeah, I had to check that address, albaniatourguide.com. And these timetables turned out to be really accurate, so I highly suggest looking on this website if you need to find out some bus timetables and also some other tips to Albania. That website had some really good ones. But what's also worth keeping in mind is that there are differences between the bus tables depending on if you're traveling there off season as I did, and also high season or peak season, because during off season the buses don't run as frequently as during peak season, which is understandable, but just something to keep in mind because this is not information that you will find anywhere. There is not information about this, so you just have to really ask around, ask at your accommodation, ask the locals or ask the bus driver once you're in a destination about the next bus leaving. Just ask around and people will be happy to help, because the bus timetables they're not always true in Albania, so just keep that in mind. So buses in Albania are cheap, and this is also true with the city buses, like the local city buses that run within a city from like like the bus terminals into city center, for example. So they expect to pay around 30 to 50 lek for a journey within the city or town that you're visiting with the local city bus. And again, this works similarly as to the other buses. You pay with cash to the person who collects the money. Usually there's a driver, and then there's another person who always collects the money for the bus tickets. And speaking of city buses, so for example, the bus terminal in Tirana, the capital of Albania, is located just a bit outside of the Tirana city center. And there will be a lot of taxi drivers there telling you that the bus is really inconvenient and not really fast, that it's better to take the taxi. And whilst this is partly true, because of course the bus is a bit slower to reach your destination compared to the taxis in Albania are like surprisingly expensive, which is why I recommend taking the bus when possible, especially if you're traveling by yourself. And taking the city bus from the Tirana bus terminal into the city center is not inconvenient or hard to do. You can ask the locals again for help, but also the bus stops that you need to get to in order to reach the city center are located right outside of the bus terminal in Tirana. So just keep that in mind, because they're not hard to use, and you can take the local city bus for about 40 lek, I believe, and that way you will reach the Tirana city center much more cheaper compared to a taxi. And this is the same thing in Berat. The bus terminal in Berat is located about 3 kilometers from the Berat city center, which means that you have to get into the city center by foot, or you can also take the bus. So in Berat you will find the blue city bus, which runs between the bus terminal in Berat and the Berat city center, which is really convenient. And again, I think you pay like 30 or 40 lek to get into city center, or the other way around, and it's just a very convenient way, and it's very fast as well. And here you can ask the driver for help, because I'm sure he will be happy to help you to find the bus to the city center once you arrive at the bus terminal. So in Gjirokaster, the bus stop is about 1 kilometer from the old town or the main area in Gjirokaster, which means that you can walk it pretty easily. It is uphill, and if you have a lot of luggage, then I do recommend taking a taxi instead, because the taxi stop is right next to the bus station or bus stop in Gjirokaster, so very convenient. But you can easily walk it, which I did, but I only had a backpack, so just keep that in mind. It's cobblestone and it's uphill, so keep that in mind if you're traveling to Gjirokaster by bus. And also it's worth to check with the accommodation that you're staying in, because sometimes they do offer free pickup and drop off from and to the bus station, so you can use that as well. And speaking of buses and paying with cash, in Albania everything is paid by cash, so make sure you always carry enough cash so you can pay for things like transportation, for food, for any shopping you do during the day, and for your accommodation, because literally all the accommodations that I stayed in Albania were paid by cash. They did not accept card, and it's usually like I stayed in hostels, in Airbnb, and some local like homestays. So yeah, just have enough cash with you when you're traveling in Albania. Very rarely was I able to pay anything with a card. I think one thing I paid with card was the eSIM or mobile data for Vodafone at the airport. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Everything is paid by cash. And one point that I highlighted a lot in my Albania travel vlogs, which you can also check out, is that you can withdraw money for free from the Credits bank ATMs, from the Credits ATMs. This is the one, and I think the only ATM that is free to withdraw money from, because otherwise you have to pay like 700 lek, which is like 6 euros. When you like withdraw money a lot, which you will in Albania because you always need cash, you're gonna be spending a lot of money, like extra money, just to withdraw from the very expensive ATM. So always, when possible, use the Credits ATM to withdraw cash when you're traveling in Albania. I just got out money from the ATM, and unfortunately they don't have a Credits bank ATM here in Ksamil, I believe. At least I didn't find one on Google Maps. So that means I had to use another bank. So Credits ATM, Credits bank, if you withdraw money from Credits bank, you get money free of charge, which is amazing. But now that they didn't have a credits bank, and I'm not sure like if I need how much cash I need for today, and also just in general, I used the Tirana bank, and the withdrawal fee was 700 lek, which is quite a lot of money. It's like 6 euros to withdraw money. So definitely, if you can find a credits bank, use that one instead. It's so much better. So if you're wondering what places you should visit in Albania, that totally depends on your preferences and what you would like to do on your trip, because Albania, it's on the coast, but there's also mountains. So the country is very diverse, and I'm sure that everyone will find something or some places that they'd like to visit in Albania. For example, a lot of people tend to visit the coast, especially during peak season, which is really beautiful. The Albanian coast is beautiful, but it's just good to keep in mind that it is a bit more touristy, and if you're traveling to Albania, I do recommend checking out another city as well, like inlands, for example Gjirokaster or Berat, because that will just make the experience a lot better in my opinion. And then also keep in mind that the seasons or like the time when you visit in Albania can affect how you will like the place that you visit. That was hard to explain, but maybe you get the point. So for example, if you want to travel on the coast of Albania, so during off-season it might be good to just stay in the bigger cities like Sarande, for example, instead of going to Ksamil or Himare, because even though Himare and Ksamil might be good options like during high season when there's more people around, these places were very dead, like too peaceful in my opinion during March, which is when I visited. So, you know, if you're traveling off season and want to go to the coast, then just stay in Saranda, because there will be a lot more options to choose from when it comes to shopping and when it comes to restaurants, and just places are more open there. During off season, the places in Ksamil and Himare, like restaurants and a lot of hotels and bars and pubs and cafes, like everything is just closed, so there's not a lot to do. But then again, if you're visiting during peak season, then Saranda might be too crowded and there might be too many tourists, so then it might be good looking into Himare and Ksamil for a bit more peaceful experience. But I mean, this just comes down to personal preference really. And also keep in mind that the coastal towns in Albania, like Himare, Ksamil and Saranda, tend to be more expensive because they're more touristy, so expect to pay more for food, groceries and accommodation in these destinations. If you're flying into Tirana or flying out of Tirana, then I do recommend spending a couple of days in the capital of Albania, because it will just give you a very different experience. Tirana is much more international feeling compared to the other cities and towns I visited in Albania, so it was really interesting to spend a few days there. So I do recommend spending a few days there. There are cool restaurants and cool places to visit in Tirana, and also spending some time and checking out cities like Berat and Gjirokaster is also worth it, because those towns are then again very, very different compared to the coastal towns and also to Tirana. So, you know, if you want to have a very wholesome and very versatile experience, I guess, just you can visit Tirana and then maybe Berat or Gjirokaster, and then also the coast, for example Saranda, Himare and Ksamil. That's what I did, and I had a wonderful experience visiting all of those places in Albania. Then also northern Albania is great for hiking, if that's something that you enjoy doing. I do, but unfortunately during off season most of the hiking trails in Albania are closed because of like unsafe conditions and snowfall. So, you know, the trail or hiking trail between Valbonia and Tet, which is a very popular destination in northern Albania, was closed when I visited, which is a shame, because that's one thing I would like to do in Albania, but that just means I have to go back. But that being said, it is worth to note that if you like hiking, then like traveling during off season might not be the best idea. You might want to visit like in May, for example, or June, or like in the summertime in general, to be able to do the popular hikes. So, you know, northern Albania is great for hiking. And again, Albania definitely has some differences depending on if you visit during off-season or if you visit during peak season, for example. So during off-season, you know, it's more peaceful. Places tend to be more affordable to spend time in. I would say the experience in general is just more intimate. Some places might also be like too peaceful, like for example the coastal towns that I mentioned already, and hiking trails are closed. So if that's something you'd like to do, then off-season might not be the best time to visit for you. And also buses don't run as frequently during off-season. But then again, you know, during peak season or high season, it can be more expensive, like accommodations, hostels, hotels and Airbnbs usually raise their prices a bit, and some places might be very, very touristy, which just makes for a whole other experience. But also, like, most places are open during high season, so you know, there are like disadvantages and advantages to both sides. So just, you know, consider like what you want to do and what kind of experience you want to have, and choose your time accordingly. So let's talk about internet in Albania, because most accommodations do provide free Wi-Fi nowadays, as I guess with all around the world, but that doesn't mean that the Wi-Fi is good. So if you're really dependent on having reliable internet access, then you might want to look into getting like a local SIM card, for example, which is what I did. I got a local SIM card, an eSIM, which is really convenient, at Tirana airport from Vodafone, and I paid around 20 euros to have 35 gigs of data during my whole stay, which was 2 weeks, and that was just plenty for me, and that was really great. Because if you're working in Albania or planning to do some work online while you're in Albania, then I do suggest that you get an SIM card, like a local SIM card with some mobile data, because that way you will have more reliable like internet access, and you don't have to worry about like the Wi-Fi in accommodations not being the best. And as I mentioned, Vodafone was what I chose, and it seemed to be a very reliable option in Albania, as they had multiple locations. They usually had like offices around Albania in a lot of different cities. Okay, so moving on to the locals and some culture things. So when you're traveling in Albania, you will notice that people are very friendly and always ready to help. If you just smile and say hello, they will usually smile and say hello back and even wave to you. So just keep a smile on your face and greet the people you meet. You will also notice that locals love their raki, which is their traditional like alcoholic, like their booze, and that's what they like to drink. And they will offer you raki in every situation possible. Doesn't matter like what time of the day it is or what day it is, or you know, if it's morning or night, they will offer you raki in different situations and scenarios. For example, when I was supposed to leave Gjirokaster, I was paying for my accommodation there, and I had cash, but I didn't have like the exact amount. So the homestay that I stayed at, the lovely lady, that was like the owner of the place, she went to get some change for me, whilst her husband then offered me some raki during my very long, like 5-minute wait. So that was funny. He didn't speak any English, but we had some raki and it was all good. Also, raki is usually offered like on the house in restaurants or cafes, or you know, everywhere, and they're very proud of it usually, because especially if they make their raki themselves, they're like, this is the best raki, you have never had a raki this good, and then they say that it's a good and you should definitely try it. So you know, just keep an open mind and maybe say yes to the raki once in a while to get the true Albanian experience. So if you know me, you know that I love food, so let's talk about Albania food, because it is really good, and I think it is not like very widely spoken about. Albania food is not often mentioned when it comes to like good foods around the world. Usually people tend to like mention how much they love Greek food or Italian food, but I will have to say I do like Albanian food a lot more than Greek food, to be honest. I just think it's more tastier. So yeah, Albanian cuisine is delicious and eating out is very affordable. So when I was in Albania, I always had a feast for dinner with some like house wine, and it always ended up to be about 1,000 lek, which is like 9 euros, so not bad at all. And of course you can get away much more cheaper as well. There's always cheap options, and you don't have to eat like a king or queen every night, but the food was so good, so that's what I did. And also wine and beer is also very inexpensive, so if you are eating out and you want to have a glass of wine or a beer, then you don't have to break your bank for a drink. And speaking of wines, Albania does have some good wines. So if you're ever in an area in Albania where you have the chance to visit a local winery, then I highly suggest you do that, because it's a lovely experience and the wine is pretty good as well. So some foods to try in Albania is burek, which is a savory pastry which you can also find in other countries as well, like some other countries in the area, for example in Turkey I believe, and also in Greece. So yeah, burek it makes a great snack or a breakfast for a very small amount of money. And my personal favorite in Albania was fergese, which is made from a type of cottage cheese or white cheese, and it's a really tasty dish with cheese and also some bell peppers usually. Another favorite of mine was the rice balls or kifki, which is just like fried rice balls, but you should try a few different ones because they do differ in taste and consistency across Albania and depending on who makes them for you. So yeah, kifki is another dish that you should definitely try when you're in Albania. Another cheese dish is just grilled white cheese. It's really good because the cheese is so soft and good, and I must admit I did eat a lot of cheese in Albania, but it was just so good. And also like any dish with grilled vegetables, most of the time it was like grilled eggplant or grilled bell peppers or anything like grilled vegetables in general. Those dishes are so good. And also Albania is really good for vegetarians, even though they do have a lot of traditional like meat dishes. I did mostly eat veggie dishes during my stay in Albania because those were my favorite and they were so good. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. If you're vegetarian, you will be just fine in Albania. So we're getting to the end of this video and I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about Albania, anything you'd like to know about my trip there, or any tips or anything like that, then just make sure to put your comments and questions in the comments, because I would be happy to make another Albania related video. And also if you do have any questions about travels or me or my travels in like specifically, then just make sure to leave those questions and comments down as well, and I will make sure to answer them. So yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe you want to check out my Albania travel vlogs next. I will put the playlist here so you can binge watch the whole series next. So yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.